Hey guys, Spanners here. Welcome to Missed Apex, and today we continue our series looking back at the careers of the brave and bold in Formula One. This week we look back to the career of a British institution, a world champion, a broadcaster that brings fantastic insight and charm to our TV screens. I'm talking, of course, of Jenson Button, and I am not the person that has all the knowledge about these things. So someone who's done research and work and is generally right about things, it's our Quizmaster Chief General, Chris Catman Turner. Hello, Chris.
Hi, Spanners. It's very, very hot today. I'm going to try not make like one of Jenson's engines from his days at Honda, where they just expired towards the end. So if I keel over, send help.
Yeah, I think, though, a lot of people will actually remember Jenson Button as Fernando Alonso's friend who used to just poodle around at the back of the grid in that doomed McLaren Honda. But just note, it is July 1st when we're recording this. Of course, this won't come out until the 10th, when I think the weather will be very different. But if this will explain why me and Chris are just like, it looks like we're crying, but it's sweat. Okay, Jenson Button. Such a kind of charming, charismatic part of the Formula One landscape.
Absolutely. And I think I have to have a responsibility here not to let my fandom, as you can see, YouTube viewers by my flags and shirts that I'm wearing today, influence my opinion here. And I've got to have a bit more of an objective look at the career of one of my heroes. And you're right in that many F1 fans will know him from his commentary and punditry, but I think a surprising number of our listeners will have never actually seen him race.
No, see, this is the problem with the DTS boom. I'm not gatekeeping DTS people, but yeah, the fan space has massively blown up. And so to me, Jenson Button and even that Honda McLaren era feels like it just happened. And it doesn't actually really feel like his Brawn championship was that long ago. But I would probably say the majority of people listening now probably didn't watch Jenson Button racing in his career. And in fact, wasn't there a final race where he subbed in for one race?
There was. So he retired in 2016,
Right.
But he was an ambassador for McLaren in 2017. And when Fernando decided he wanted to go off and play with his American friends at IndyCar, that clashed with Monaco. So Jenson subbed in for him. And he, if you remember in the race, he flipped Pascal Wehrlein nearly into the harbour. And to this day, he still has a 3-place grid penalty for the next race that Jenson takes part in. So if he ever makes a comeback, he's going to have to serve that penalty.
I remember that being fairly reluctant. Like, he didn't sound massively thrilled, but I guess he was still under contract to do it, so he had to.
Yeah, it's like the third driver rule, isn't it? And he was just like, oh, I have to drive? I'm going to pee in your seat. I remember they had a nice little exchange on the way to the grid with Fernando on the telephone.
Yeah, I mean, we're starting at the wrong end of his career, really, but it was an unfortunate end. So, I remember obviously after he's won his championship, you think, well, maybe that's just the beginning, and then you're up against Lewis Hamilton, looking pretty good against Lewis Hamilton. And there was interviews with him about, would you ever, what happens if you don't win another title? And he was, the way he was talking was like, well, that's not going to happen. I'm going to win other titles, but should this be my only title, I guess I can walk away happy. And then it just kept slipping backwards, and he just got dragged under the water with the demise of McLaren. And it's really hard for people to imagine now, but McLaren were a real fighting dominant force in F1, and the thought of them being not right up there at the top was madness. And of course, if you've just tuned in the last couple of years, you go, what are you on about? McLaren, they're a top team. But they just had this crash where suddenly they couldn't get out of Q3. Then they couldn't get out of they couldn't get into Q3, sorry. Then they couldn't score points. And they just ended up like welded to the bottom of the grid for years and years and years. And unfortunately, the end of a very promising career was sort of dragged under with that. So where should we start? The beginning, Catman? This young, charismatic Brit bursting onto the scene?
Yeah, well, are you talking about me or about young, charismatic Brit? Thank you very much.
Shall
very kind of you.
We could do the Catman origin, or we could do Jenson Button.
We've done the Catman origin story. Let's go for the Jenson Button origin story. So Jenson exploded onto the scene in F1. He did so. His first ever taste was with Prost F1 team, where he did. Yeah, so that was his hero, and he grew up watching him, and then he did a test for them, and he actually did a lap that was faster than their race driver Jean Alesi at the time. So Frank Williams immediately went, okay, this guy's pretty good. I'm going to sign him up. So he was touting was a future world champion. I think he said something along the lines of, all the girls love him and all the boys want to be him, that sort of thing.
That's like
he
a
was,
Bond line, isn't it?
yeah, exactly. So it was something along those lines, and he was meant to be the next big thing. And he proved fast. On his second race, actually his first race, he retired from the points. And in his second race, he scored points. And he was the youngest driver at the time ever to do so. So it was quite an explosive start for him. And he qualified in P3 at Spa ahead of the champion Michael Schumacher. So he definitely had raw pace. But that was kind of it for 2000. He showed that he was good, but he actually lost his seat at Williams for 2001. And the reason for that was because they had Juan Pablo Montoya, who I believe you've met in person.
I have touched Juan Pablo Montoya.
So he was actually under contract for Williams in 2000, but was on loan to an IndyCar team, and he won the championship there. And so Williams had to take up the option on him or lose him to another F1 team, because he was desperate to come and win in Formula One. So people like Ferrari and McLaren were interested in him.
Yeah.
But so Williams had to take him. So then Button was left without a seat. So he moved to Benetton with Flavio Briatore as his manager.
I'd forgotten that.
Yeah, well, the 2001 car was awful, but Jenson was worse. He was just terrible. Flavio said that he was a lazy playboy. And, as a 21-year-old guy with a house in Monaco, he bought a super yacht called Little Missy, I think its name was, and he parked it in the harbour right outside the paddock. And he was known for having boozy parties with lovely ladies and all these sorts of things. And yeah, he only finished ahead of Fisichella once that season and only qualified Everton 4 times. He'd gone off the rails by that point.
And I think like Fisichella, when we talk about if you're a rookie and you come in and say like Bortoletto now, he's been put against Hulkenberg, you go, Hulkenberg's great, but you've got to come in and beat Hulkenberg. You've got to come in and like that's the same with Fisichella, isn't it? You want to come in and be beaten Fisichella.
Yeah, absolutely. Fisichella was a great driver, but he wasn't, world-class material. But as you say, when you come in, there's no room for bedding yourself in and slowly getting in there, particularly as it was his second season. You've got to start beating people, and your teammate is the one you have to beat. And I think Briatore used the lazy playboy thing as a motivational tool, shall we say, because he spread it amongst the media, and Briatore is not one to shy away from sound bites and controversy, shall we say.
I do remember there was issues with his behaviour or how his behaviour was reported. And I mean, even little things like he did a bunch of donuts on a practice behind some cameras and ended up getting some kind of fine or reprimanded for that kind of thing. But it's just that kind of attitude, I think, that he had at the beginning where he was very kind of YOLO and what I would call a hooray Henry, but I don't know if that translates to anywhere else in the world.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because actually I think the thing you're thinking of was Lewis. He did some burnouts in Australia in front of some media.
No, maybe they both did it then.
But actually, interestingly though, I think this whole playboy and being distracted by things outside of F1, that seems to be leveled at people when they're not doing so well and they're enjoying their life, shall we say. And it's not necessary, as you say, clicks. Or back then it would be buying papers, wouldn't it?
There's a bit of tall poppy, buying papers. A newspaper. There's a bit of tall poppy syndrome. So in the UK, anyone who's rises to the top as a British athlete, they do tend to come under massive scrutiny. The worst thing you can do in the UK is become quite good at tennis, but not the absolute best at tennis in the world. And then you're just going to be in the papers every day. Hamilton obviously got his fair share of it. But like you look at someone like Kimi Räikkönen, who by all reports definitely likes a party. You barely really heard of any of that, and he was all cool for doing it. But I don't know. I think Jenson Button has enough kind of charm that in the media he got away with it. I don't remember really stories of like, this kid needs to knuckle down and take things seriously. I think he was just sort of liked, is my impression.
Yeah, I think he was liked, but there was an air of this guy needs to actually make use of the opportunities that are afforded to him because he was just completely off the boil in 2001. So when he had all this problems with Flavio and being comprehensively beaten by Fisichella, he himself said that actually that made him knuckle down and get better. So in 2002, he was up against Trulli, the Trulli train. He beat him in the series. So it definitely made a difference. But then again, the problem with that is that Flavio had his new little protege called Fernando Alonso coming up through the ranks, and then he replaced Jenson with Fernando. So once again, for no fault of his own, he's been ousted from yet another team.
Wait, so they hung on to Trulli instead of Button?
Yes. That was a very interesting choice, I would suggest.
Okay, so far, are we counting this as 1-1? So we're counting it as a loss against Fisichella and a win against Trulli.
Yeah.
But so far, though, that's a pretty soft launch into F1. This is not quite Russell-esque with his teammates that he had at Williams at the start of his career. No disrespect to the injury that Kubica had. But, okay, so where do we go from there? I mean, it sounds like to be honest, it sounds like a fairly crap start to his career.
I mean, he showed promise, but he'd had a bit of up and down. So then he moved to BAR, British American Racing, alongside the world champion Jacques Villeneuve. So you think that's going to be a bit more of a challenge. But
there you go.
Let's not forget, Villeneuve was a one-hit wonder. He was at the end of his career, really. And JV saw him as a big threat. So immediately, rather than welcoming Jenson to the team, he trash-talked him, as Villeneuve loves to do nowadays. That he decided to play him down and play on the Playboy thing and say, he's got loads of unfulfilled promise, but promise doesn't mean anything unless you do it on the track, which he then proceeded to do. And he beat Villeneuve 17 points to 6 and regained his reputation as being a good driver.
So, right, which point scoring system was this under? Was this still 10 for a win, 8 for second place?
I think it was. It was the 10-8-6. Yeah, that one.
It was the middle point system between the top 6 one and that. So, yeah, it's just when you said that amount of points, you go, that sounds like a really low amount of points. We should clarify that it was only 10 points for a win. God, when we do these, like the names of the teams that pop up and you suddenly go, oh, yeah. Like Prost. I forgot Alain Prost tried to make it Prost F1. Is that the Enstone outfit? Is that now Renault? Oh, I love this game.
I'm not sure, but Prost turned in. No, I know that BAR turned into Mercedes.
Oh, nice.
We had Stewart turned into Jaguar, turned into Red Bull.
Yep.
We had Jordan, turned into Midland, turned into Spiker, turned into Force India, turned into Aston Martin.
Oh, you forget that was Jordan's team.
Yep.
Yeah.
What did Prost do? They must have. They must have sold to Enstone.
Somebody did this great chart of basically the entities, and obviously Ferrari are the longest standing one.
Ferrari, Williams, and McLaren are the only ones who've had complete participation from their beginning to their end without having a name change. Although Williams, you could argue nowadays, is starting to move more towards a different type of entity, but it's still called
Williams.
Still got
the name.
So, yeah, exactly.
Who did Prost F1 become? You will listen to me Googling things.
I'm pretty sure you're absolutely right. It must have gone to Renault, then Alpine, then Renault, then Alpine about 1 million times, and then whoever they're going to sell out to next year. I still maintain that that's what's going to happen to Alpine.
It's interesting with the BAR thing as well, because obviously in my head I didn't link BAR as Mercedes, and Mercedes were Brawn, who were Honda, and so really Jenson Button did full circle and ended up back at that same unit eventually with Brawn GP. But we're a little far from Brawn GP in our Jenson Button journey, aren't we?
A little way, but as you rightly say, though, it does kind of move that way. So in 2004, then, he had the best package at BAR behind Ferrari. So he took his first podium in Malaysia, he took his first pole at Imola, and he came third in the championship. He got 10 podiums through the season, so he was doing incredibly well. He didn't have any wins that year because the 2004 Ferrari, you might remember, was the original Death Star and just destroyed everything. So, yeah, absolutely. But yeah, so in 2004, he showed that he was a driver with great prospects. but needed to make something happen in his career to get ahead.
So these were my lost years in F1, by the way, as an aside.
Okay.
You know my job is to interrupt your carefully prepared notes. and by the way, Prost F1 team became Ligier, and then that became Renault, which was then Lotus, Alpine. So it's the Enstone outfit, isn't it? I was right, immediately right. Incorrect challenge. I think you just got surprised. They're like, oh, Spanners. Well, if Spanners thinks it's Enstone, it can't be. So let's...
That's exactly what it was. Yeah. So I tried to bluster you with more information and facts that you couldn't possibly check on the fly.
This is my dark years. This was like the initial part of my army service, I guess, as well, which doesn't help. But mostly it was Michael Schumacher just ruining it. And, I'd get to a Sunday, see the start, see the fact that, they're dominating again, have a little nap, tune back in later to see if any engines had blown up. Oh, no, he's now 3 laps ahead of the field. So... it got lost in that era, the battles that were bubbling away underneath. And it's not quite like it is now. Now you'll have driver profiles on anyone who's on the F1 grid. So, we knew everything about Logan Sargent. If Logan Sargent was driving in 2001, you'd know his name, maybe just his surname. It just wouldn't come into the consciousness. But there were people fighting for their careers, bubbling under the surface, while Schumacher was shoemaking.
Shoemaking. Yeah, absolutely. And it was quite interesting, all the wranglings that were happening underneath to try and get into the seat that was going to be the next big thing. So Ferrari dominance was going to end eventually, whether the FIA had a hand in it or not.
Didn't feel like it.
Yeah. So Jenson was possibly concentrating a little bit too much on what was going on outside. So his BAR team... he thought they were doing well, but he needs to be in a works team like the Ferrari team to be able to win, as was the kind of perceived wisdom
I think that's
back
fair.
then. Yeah. So he was having the best season so far at BAR in 2004, but he wanted a works engine deal. And he was looking over at what Montoya was doing at the Williams BMW team, but going back to that team thinking, I got on well there. I liked them. It wasn't my fault I left. And so he did a deal with Williams to move there in 2005. But... he also had a contract to race for BAR in 2005. And BAR didn't want to let their hot shoe go. So they decided to fight it. And they got all the way to a contract recognition board who said that the BAR contract actually still stood for 2005. So he had to stay. Now, whether you want a driver that's not exactly committed to you to stay is another thing. But they were desperate, so they did. And so Jenson had to stay there for 2005. So...
God, that's so awkward, though, isn't it? It's like, imagine a marriage where you go, I want a divorce. It's going badly, but actually, technically, you have to stay completely married for a year. And just go, at that point, like, I'm sure the lawyers and everything are like, well, we're correct. But I bet everyone in the team would just be like, can't we just wish him good luck and just let him go on and rather than making him be here?
Well, especially since he then tried to sign again for Williams in 2006. So he stayed for one more year and then went, no, I really, really want to go over there. So I sign again for 2006. A few weeks later, he finds out that BMW are pulling the plug on their BMW Williams partnership. So Williams now don't have a works deal. So he then goes, the only reason I was going there was for the works engine deal. So then he goes, well, I want to stay at BAR now. So it's exactly like a marriage where you've basically been caught cheating and then want to come crawling back. Williams made him pay a lot of money, many, many millions of pounds to break that contract he'd just signed with them to stay at BAR. But BAR wanted him to stay, so he did.
Okay, so which team of BAR? So BAR become Honda eventually, right? It is worth tracking who turns into who. And the fascinating thing here is you've got a driver who, I guess by this point, everyone says he's quick. I guess it was a slightly less technical era as well. So there's less fear about, moving over to a different engine. You're going to have to learn all the different things like that. I feel like in that period, drivers could move around a little bit and their skill would translate over quicker. And he's one of a new generation really coming through that is just fast. And you've got like Raikkonen and Alonso. And I think these guys... already, when I talk about the difference between modern F1 drivers and, when I upset people and I say Stroll would have beaten Senna, these guys are a step up from like Alesi, Trulli, Fisichella, all those guys who are just that kind of half a generation older. There was a real change. I wonder what was going on in the background in the junior series in karting, but this generation of drivers coming through incredibly quick. But they've all got to play this career game in Formula One, and that's one of the more fascinating aspects about F1 careers when you look at it. And they're all trying to play chess and see where the market is moving. So you go, I never thought of Williams as a factory team, if that makes sense. They've always been a privateer team. And so was that the only time Williams have been a works engine team?
So they were works Renault throughout the 90s. So when you had Prost, Mansell, Hill, Villeneuve all win their titles, they were the works Renault team in all but name, essentially. And then they switched over. They had a few years when Renault retired. I think they went to Cosworth.
Yep.
And then they went to BMW for a good stint and became the proper works team with them. Then they quit, and then they went back to Cosworth, then tried to do, I can't remember now, Honda probably. So lots of different people. They've been in the doldrums ever since. When they lost Newey, when they lost their works engine deal, they just kind of plummeted down the grid, and they're still reeling from it and trying to get back up.
Mm-hmm. And for those who are newer or more casual fans, why do you want a works deal? Why do you want to be with the engine? Is like a smallish part of the car, isn't it? Isn't it all about aero? Why do you want to be with the engine?
I guess there are three things, aren't there? There's aero. Matt will hate me if I don't say tyres.
Yeah.
And then the engine as well. So don't forget, back here we had Bridgestone versus Goodyear tyre wars going on as well.
So Ferrari had the deal with Bridgestone.
Yeah.
Right.
So basically, until the Bridgestone tyres got nerfed when they started playing around with those sorts of things, they were unstoppable. So you had to try and get a Bridgestone tyre deal and a works engine deal, because when you have a works engine, you get more integration with the chassis. You can package things better, although that didn't work so well for McLaren with their size
Honda,
zero concept with Honda. But that's the idea. If they had got that to work, they would have been on top. But it's just, these things don't always work out. But nowadays, the conventional wisdom is that, but then McLaren aren't the works Mercedes partner in 2024, 2025, and they're doing okay, aren't they?
Yeah, I don't know if it's so much the case now, but there was also a perception of a little bit of control from the factory. So if you had a Mercedes engine, we had the story where Lotus under Genie had the Mercedes engine, and they were in charge a little bit of what engine modes were available. And so, Matthew Carter tells that story of when it was convenient for Lotus to be holding up a Red Bull, or was it a Red Bull car? I can't remember now. The Mercedes engineer at the back sort of unlocked a secret engine mode or something like that. Yeah. So there's
when
this perception
Grosjean was charging down somebody that would have benefited the works team. Yeah. So they just gave him a new engine mode. He said somehow the car just came alive and I could do things I couldn't do before. It's crazy.
That's funny. So there's this kind of perception of control and power from the works team. So that is what the drivers are looking for. And I think that's a big part of Lewis Hamilton going to Mercedes in 2013, kind of going, oh, right, the works team, the big boys are actually forming their F1 team. That would have given you a lot of confidence, because it's not only the works supplier for the engine, but also the mothership running a team itself.
And the massive budget that comes with that. So Honda had a massive budget in 2008, 2009, or rather 2008, and then pulled the plug to go 2009. We'll come to that. Yeah. So that you're looking for big budget, integration, and dedication from the team. So that's why he basically wrangled to go between BAR and Williams and had that awful thing going on there with the contracts and basically just got distracted.
And then what happened, Uncle Catman?
Well, then what happened? So where should we go to? So let's go to 2006. So Honda, we talked about there, just buys BAR outright. So he's made the right decision in the end to stay at BAR, now becomes a works Honda team. He's like, right, I'm on the money here. And in 2006, he's absolutely right. He gets his first win in Hungary. And this was, so Jenson is known for his changing conditions.
Oh, here we go.
And his wet weather. Well, we could debate this till the cows come home. So his first win in Hungary then in 2006, it was wet conditions. He started in 14th with an engine penalty and made his all the way up to first, overtaking wet weather gods, the Rainmeister, Michael Schumacher, along the way. So it's undoubted, really, that he was incredibly good. He took 7 out of his 15 wins, I think it was, in F1 in wet and changeable conditions. And he's won one of the fewest pole to win ratios of any champion that there's been. So he got 15 poles, but he didn't win a lot of the ones he actually got pole position for. Huh. So he kind of won more when he was fighting through the field and actually in the wet conditions.
Surely Leclerc is a challenger for that title of least poles.
Leclerc is not a champion yet.
Oh, right. Good point. Yeah, good point.
But yes,
least poles
absolutely.
converted. So my beef with this has always been that it's this thing about the changeable conditions is if you just do the opposite to what everyone's doing. So a bit of rain's coming down, everyone bolts for inters, stay out. See if the weather changes. Now, if it starts to get a little bit harder, you come in a lap later, no one really cares. Oh, that guy that was in 13th, he's in 15th now. No one cares. But if it suddenly clears up and you stayed out on slicks and you get basically a free stop on the field, you look like a genius. Now, if your gamble is only correct 1 out of 4 times, honestly, Pete, you can point to the 1 out of 4 and go, look, I'm a genius. And then the 3 out of 4, just don't mention them. It's like, I feel like it's a fortune teller who throws out 100 predictions at New Year, and then the next New Year only points to the 3 that happen to be correct. I'd have to go through this race by race, but that was my perception at the time, because I feel like I noticed more times when his gambles didn't work than when they did. But I'm sure you could take me through every decision race by race and go, no, you're wrong. He was a genius.
Absolutely, I'm sure I could. But so there was a few races where he did do these sorts of things. Australia 2010, for example, where it was drying track and he was behind Lewis and he pitted for dries, admittedly possibly a lap too early, and he skidded off the circuit. But then it was wet in sector 1, but dry in sectors 2 and 3, so he made it work, and that got him up into the winning position essentially. Mm-hmm. China 2010. I'm not going to bore you with Canada 2011, but everybody knows what happened there.
Shut up. No, we're not using that as an example of bundled his teammate into the wall, won by default from a Vettel mistake.
Yeah. So, well, actually say that. So I'll give some context to that. So yes, he bundled his teammate into a wall. He then punted Fernando Alonso off later in the race as well. That he then got damage for, went to the back of the grid or back of the safety car restart. And then he made his way all the way up to first. So he, with 2 laps to go, I think it was, he was in P4. So he was behind Webber, Michael Schumacher and Vettel. But he was on the tyres that he'd managed to heat up and get in the right condition. And he was catching. And actually he overtook Webber and Schumacher within 2 corners of each other. And then was hounding Vettel. I think he'd taken a few, like 2 or 3 seconds out of him in that final lap. And was going to pass him because he was going so much quicker.
Okay,
and he pressured Vettel into a mistake. Vettel didn't just skid off the road for no reason.
And also, you can't make those gambles work anyway if you don't have skill in wet weather driving. So he's undoubtedly a great inclement weather driver.
Absolutely. And if you'll indulge me, we can go through a little bit of why he was so good.
Go on. Yeah. Smooth. Yeah. Old smooth Jenson Button. Famed for his smooth inputs.
Yeah, the smooth operator, the original one. So, actually, I say the original. His hero, Alan Prost, who we talked about earlier on, was also incredibly smooth on the steering wheel. So, to do that, what you need is you need a car that's incredibly stable on its back end. So that is why when the double diffuser came out in 2009 with the Brawn team, and then for the subsequent seasons with McLaren, he was really on it and up there with the best, because that gave a lot of downforce at the back end. And you can brake. He used to brake a lot earlier than other people, settle the car, and then delicately and precisely turn the steering wheel to go in, and then balance the car on the throttle with tiny little inputs, be much busier on those pedals than the other drivers who were frantically sawing away at the steering wheel, like Alonso, Vettel, Hamilton, for example. They very much do it through their hands, whereas he would do it through his feet. So his steering wheel would look serene, but his feet would be working overtime. The gist of that means that it has less wear on the tyres because you get more stable loading, less slip, and it's harder to heat up the tyres. So you're less good at quali, but you're better off in the races.
Yeah, and he was saying like he would actually struggle to get the tyres fired up. So I think we're talking about carrying speed versus V'ing the corners. Getting that speed off early and then going for a lower minimum speed through the corner instead of like getting it aggressively turned. And so, a lot of drivers will try and get into the corner, brake really late, like Hamilton, and then get that car rotated. This is why Hamilton wants a planted rear end as well, so that it's not slipping away when he's trying to wrestle it like a bear. And you had these big stories with Lewis Hamilton where they said his dad would look at where the other kids were braking, and then he'd go and stand a few meters beyond that and say to Lewis, "Don't brake until you get to me." So his whole skill was based around this super late braking. And you go, okay, well with Button, that style definitely got him as far as it did. So as much as he now says, I had real problems with tyre warm up, maybe I was too smooth, he probably wouldn't swap. I don't think he wouldn't go back to the beginning and swap his driving style.
No, absolutely. And the key bit is that this is what made him good in changing conditions, because overheating your tyres is key. So his driving style meant that he wasn't causing a lot of scrub on those tyres. So when you got a smooth driving style, you get more even loading on the tyres, which makes more grip and fewer lockups. So Jenson was able to manage that in those changeable conditions. So when the inters, for example, were wearing down and you're getting them, through to the canvas and you're not trying to overheat them, he was better at that.
Yeah. Okay. You're starting to move me a little bit. I think I got too hung up on my, he was a gamble merchant in changeable conditions. Yes, he obviously had a driving style to then capitalize on it. So where did we get in the chronological story of Jenson Button? Because things are just starting to get good now. Honda come into Formula One in 2007. 2006. So in the end, it was only a 2-year run in Formula One. A doomed 2-year adventure.
Exactly. So what happened in 2006 was he won his first victory. They were doing really well. Jenson thought he was on to a winner. And then they produced the Earth Dreams cars in 2007 and 2008.
I'm going to look that up now because that's the worst livery in F1.
They were terrible. It was not only the worst livery, but they were trying to do this whole concept of eco-ness, which is very big now. But back then, it wasn't so big. And particularly when they were using V10 and V8 engines, just polluting the whole atmosphere, it wasn't really working. And they essentially put too much effort into that and not enough into building a decent car. And they went from being title contenders in 2006 to being at the back of the grid. They were so awful in 2007 and 2008.
Right, that car looks really simple for that era of car, because weren't we in the winglet wars?
Yes,
phase
absolutely.
So you had little mini wings everywhere, and this looks quite a basic car shape.
Yeah, so this is when we had the winglets and the bull horns at the front on Lewis's title-winning McLaren.
Oh yeah,
yeah, and so they all got banned for 2009 because they were causing too much wash and stuff. But yeah, the car was underdeveloped, so simple. But you can argue that the utter failure of 2007 and 2008 is what made the Brawn season in 2009. Because when Ross Brawn came on, he said, these cars are so trash, we're just going to abandon it and then shift our focus to 2009. And now every time a regulation changes, we're all talking about, okay, who switched the earliest to get the most run because of this.
Yeah, and that's what we're talking about with the 2026 regulations. So the legend then is Honda have to pull out at the end of 2008. So after 3 seasons, and this is it. This is over. This isn't selling the team. This is just packing up. We're gone. Honda are pulling out completely. But then in 2009, that same outfit ends up being world champion.
Yeah. So to give context, Honda weren't bowing out just because their cars were awful. It was because of the 2008 financial crisis. So literally nobody was buying cars. They were having to shut Honda factories down to make sure that they could stay afloat. So it wasn't the right look for a massive car company to be ploughing 300+ million pounds every year into sport.
And laying off workers.
Exactly. So they pulled out. And essentially Ross Brawn and Nick Fry, there's a great documentary on Disney Plus. Go watch that because it tells the story far better than I could, with Keanu Reeves, of course, as their host. So we've got a better host, of course. But, anyway, so they buy the team for £1 and they go racing with it. So they had 300 people and they had to make half of them redundant. And they retained some guys like the fuel guy just for weekends. So he wasn't part of the team unless it was a race weekend.
Wow.
He'd come and put fuel in the car and then go home and do it. He was a plumber. He became a plumber, I think.
This has really got Monaco football team vibes. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was absolutely crazy. So they had come up with this double diffuser concept that I think Toyota and Williams had, but only Brawn could have made it work the way that they had.
Double diffuser. Go on then. You're going to describe technically what... You can't just say, magic double diffuser. It's not the F1 movie. You can't just use an F1 term and then that solved everything.
Well, the thing is, Spanners, they were good on the straights, but they had to be good in the turns
turns. So they had some unique characteristics, this double diffuser, which basically you had so much rear grip that you could be accelerating through a corner while other cars were still in a braking zone. It was
madness. So I'll go all summers here. And so the double diffuser. So the 2009 regulations meant that they prescribed very carefully, they had the big tall rear wing. They had this diffuser that they had prescribed to be within a certain space. And they could feed air from the floor into this diffuser. But they had prescribed it in a very tight area. But in front of that, they had no regulation to say what you could do. So what Brawn and the other two did very effectively was that they made a slit. They didn't call it a hole because a hole was prescribed by the regulations, but a slit wasn't. And the slit allowed air through and had essentially fed into the second layer of this diffuser. So it could produce almost double the amount of downforce that the normal diffuser could. And the real travesty is that, of course, Honda pulled out, having put so much effort into this, they nearly didn't even race this thing. But luckily, they all pulled together and managed to do it. But
yeah, no, go on.
I was going to say the story that they put out is, this new team, Brawn, they came and won the title in their first year. It's utter rubbish. It's the Honda Works team rebadged. And actually, I think this is an even better story than a new team coming in and doing it, because can you imagine, as a business, having run with nearly unlimited resources, unlimited people, being able to swap out parts if they even get slightly scuffed, to now having half the number of people and the emotional impact of losing all your mates. When a car comes in, they're not allowed to crash, by the way. They told them, we don't have the parts for you to crash. So if you crash, you might not be able to race the next race because we just don't have the money to build anything. They'd done no high fuel runs or pit stop practice at all before the first race. At all, none. They just had done a couple of low fuel runs at the end of testing.
But while you're on testing, though, my favourite story from that is that they went out and they did a lap and accidentally posted like this blistering lap and decided, oh, crap, we better not run with low fuel again, because they looked at that and went, oh, blimey.
Yeah. So they had all of the teams like Christian Horner, Luca de Montezemolo in charge of Red Bull and Ferrari, they'd really campaigned to try and get Brawn to be able to stay in and really help them out. Mercedes had given them an engine which they then had to shoehorn into a chassis that was designed for a Honda engine, which is no mean feat, by the way. And they were all really happy that they were staying afloat until in testing, when they put that time in, they went, they must be doing something illegal. Let's get them out again. They were not very happy. But
this is all in the lap of the gods, isn't it? Because, in a different era, they might have gone, okay, very good, but we want this gone by the beginning of the season. They could have flexi-winged this. This could have gone the way of Mercedes DAS. And you never know which way the FIA is going to rule. And they could pull a whole spirit of the regulations thing. So, yeah, we're not allowing that.
So I think they didn't want to do that because Ferrari and Red Bull went hard at this. They took them to court and the FIA ruled that the double diffusers were legal. The background to this, though, is that Ferrari and Red Bull were producing the FOTA, which is the Formula One Teams Association breakaway group. Do you remember this? Where they were trying to form a second F1 series because they weren't happy with Mosley and Ecclestone running the joint anymore. They weren't getting enough money or share of the prizes, that sort of thing. And they had got to the point where they'd approached broadcasters and circuits, and all the teams had decided to break away from F1. So, and I think the Red Bull and Ferrari had said that they had used Brawn's success to beat down on Ferrari and Red Bull. So they
I like that as a conspiracy.
Yeah, exactly. So that's where they were thinking it had happened. So that's why they let it happen.
Man. So Red Bull and Ferrari were like, hey, this innovation is clearly illegal. Can we do something about that? And then the FIA are like, no.
Yeah, I think I'll allow it this time. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's where it came from. There's a great bit in the Brawn documentary we won't go into, which is about how Ecclestone tried to withhold the prize money for Brawn after this by saying, well, you're not Honda anymore. You're a new team, so you're not due the prize money that they were due. And that was 12 million quid. So that was enough to sink Brawn if they needed to. So he was trying to then use that as leverage. So I'm not going to pay you unless you sign with us for 2010 and stay in Formula One rather than breaking away with FOTA. And there was this whole thing about they signed that deal, but then very sneakily put a little clause in that allowed them to duck out of that and basically got their prize money and then sided with Ferrari and Red Bull again. So it's all a lot of stuff going off track, which of course is quite distracting for your team when you're trying to win a championship on a shoestring. So, Button wins the first 6 of 7 races. And
that was incredible. That was
amazing.
Incredible. I think it's as well, right? We have a couple of things to add to context for this. Firstly, his teammate is Rubens Barrichello.
Yes.
Who has he lost the most titles to a teammate than anyone in history?
Yeah, he's been the bridesmaid, but never the bride, right?
Yeah.
But I will argue here. Okay, we'll go on to this. So Rubens was not given a fair shot. So you can imagine your team is running on a shoestring. You have no sponsors, no money. So they have got Jenson Button signed up. They have Rubens on short 4-race only contracts. So they don't have enough money to say, you can race for us for the whole year. We might have to sub you out halfway through and get somebody who will pay us lots of money for this seat, like a Pedro Diniz, for example. So, that's obviously not fair for Rubens. He's not got that security. But it's also really unlikely that those two Brawn cars were equal, isn't it? Because normally teams like Ferrari or Honda, when they were doing it, would produce 10 front wings and take the 2 that they've got the lowest tolerances, the best parts, right? But when you're only producing 2 parts, it's likely that one of them is going to be good and one of them is not going to be good. So who are you going to give all of the good parts to? Are you going to give them to the driver that you've signed up for the year that's won the first 2 or 3 races?
Interesting.
Or are you going to give those to... No, very people have said this thing. I think Bernie Ecclestone's alluded that it might not be the same car, but nobody else has said this. But in my opinion, the team is not going... They're going to back one horse, aren't they?
I think they should. I think every team should back one driver, yeah.
And so no matter how much Ross Brawn says, I didn't care who won as long as somebody did, the likelihood of somebody winning is better if you give one of them a better car than the other. Yeah. So... yeah, I think Rubens, and that was also borne out by the fact that Rubens had more reliability issues than Jenson because his parts didn't have the same quality control maybe that Jenson's did.
People always think it's a mad hat conspiracy when you say one driver's getting favoured over another driver. I actually just think it's the most normal situation in F1 that somebody is going to be favoured, and that comes down to developing towards your preference. That comes down to what you're saying with the parts. I mean, there was the famous one with Mark Webber and Sebastian Vettel, where Vettel broke the wing and they got given Webber's front wing, and that is a big signal that that means wait a minute, am I the clone? That's that moment in that movie moment. Oh no, I'm not real. And that's why he won, and he did that whole not bad for a number 2 driver gig. But I think it's very, very normal for drivers to be getting unequal treatment. I think the other one I point to, people can debate me on this one, was that Vettel was beating Leclerc quite comfortably. And I think Ferrari are absolutely one of these teams that favour one driver over the other. And then it's like someone just flipped a switch and overnight, suddenly, Vettel was out of favour and Leclerc's dominating him. And the big argument I was having on Twitter recently was, I'm not saying that Lewis Hamilton was being nerfed at Mercedes in that last year. I don't have an egg in that basket. I know some people have made that argument. All I'm saying is that wouldn't be crazy that you've got a driver who's signed with another team, though, so you suddenly start flipping the situation and pouring everything at George Russell. A, because it just makes sense. He's your future. And B, because, hey, the optics would look bad if we just continued what we've been doing, which is favouring Lewis Hamilton. So let's just flip that around. That would not be a crazy conspiracy whatsoever. So I'm with you, Catman. I'd never even really considered that with Paul Rubens. Plus, it's a different generation of driver. And this is what I was talking about near the beginning of the show, which is Jenson was one of this new generation that would have rinsed the drivers from 15 years previous.
Absolutely. And look, if they hadn't favoured him at the beginning, they were certainly going to do it after he won the first 6 of 7 races because, you've got no development so quickly. Red Bull and McLaren have faster cars towards the end of the season. And, you can see the pressure mounting and the championship slipping away from them as, he won the first 6 of 7 and then he was only on the podium twice for the rest of the year. That's how dramatic that fall off was.
And looking at, they had this advantage with the blown diffuser. So they were doing it best and hardest at the beginning of the season, the mostest. If you look at the Brawn GP car compared to the Red Bull at the beginning of the season, the Brawn looks really simple. So it's like really possible that this double diffuser thing really was the only thing about the car that was, that was world class.
Yeah, they say that Toyota and Williams had the double diffuser as well, and they didn't make it work as well as the Brawn. So there was something there, certainly the front wing, the floor, that sort of stuff. All of it works as a concept. But absolutely, the thing is, if you have a good idea and don't run with it, the others can have a worse idea to start with, but develop that and look at what you're doing and do it better as they go along. So, yeah, they definitely had no development at all. I think they had one front wing iteration the whole season. That was it.
Oh my God. So you're just clinging on operationally to try and hold on to that lead. And that was it, wasn't it? It was a big them being hunted down by Vettel.
Yeah, Vettel. And, it was good for Jenson that Lewis and McLaren got it together and won in places like Hungary because it was taking points off of Vettel. But you could see with Jenson, so coming back to the reason why we're here. So Jenson, he could feel that championship slipping away and the added pressure. He's got nerves, frustration. There's all these things going on outside the car. He's having inter-team battles with Rubens and they're not sharing data. There's kind of strategy problems, that sort of thing, where they're having fights with those. And also, Jenson was struggling under that pressure. He qualified outside the top 10 in 3 of the races in the second half, where his teammate wasn't doing that. And actually, that got him into the carbon fiber zone in Belgium and got him taken out the race.
Yeah. So,
he's losing points hand over fist, making it really hard for himself. And he only out-qualified Rubens once in the final 10 races. It's such a shift in absolute dominance to being nowhere and going, it's like it's suddenly changing Max into Yuki in modern day terms.
Hey.
But you know what I mean? Maybe
the Silverstone Grand Prix is between this recording and it being released. I hope Tsunoda has gone out there and won the British Grand Prix. And there will be an edit going in if that's happened.
I will gladly. You can post me a Yuki hat and I will eat it if that happens. I will love that. I love Yuki. I really love for that to happen. But yeah, and the problem I think also comes down to his driving styles. He was saying, that obviously the qualifying thing that we talked about, where he can't get the heat in the tires, whereas the others can. That was making it harder for him to get those pole positions. So he's going out in quali sessions. He's not able to put his car on the line because if he crashes it, they've got no spare bits. That's the ultimate pressure situation where he was starting to crack. And when he won the title in Brazil, he qualified in 14th place. It was atrocious. But then again, he'd had an epiphany overnight, as people put it, and he just drove through the field and came in 5th and won the championship.
What was the epiphany?
Well,
drive better.
The thing that he says did it was it had such a bad qualifying session and he was all depressed about it and was going to bed. And his dad, John Button, who was an incredible influence on his life and what a wonderful character in the paddock he was, Jensen was going to bed and he said, no, you're not. You come into the bar with me and we're going to have a drink. And they went to have a beer and they basically just sorted it out. And Jensen, I think, had one sip of the beer and went to bed, of course. And then the following morning, you could just see he had a spring in his step and he was like, I'm going to do this.
Still
I'm
drunk,
going to
probably.
win. Yeah, exactly. So I think, John Button has got a lot to do with Jensen's success because he passed away a few years after this, and you could see that Jensen's love for F1 was dwindling at that point. So, he was in the background, and it's just a wonderful story of that kind of support that he was given. But so the following day, he then went and
won that title.
Absolutely.
That's a movie. This whole thing is a movie, isn't it? How is there not...
It's a Disney series, is what it is.
No, I know, but how is there not that's classic sports tropes there. Oh, and by the way, drinking the night before really does make a difference on karting. My goodness. Go-karting just like normal time, and then go-karting after we've all met up on a Friday before a missed Apex karting event. And just the absolute, everybody regrets doing that. We've had a really well-respected journalist in the car park until race start time. Mate, come on, you got to wake. Okay. And another panelist who won't be named, who spent all the prep time when we were all busy setting up for a live show that we were doing, lying down across 3 chairs going, oh no, I've ruined the whole day, oh no. So let's hope Jenson didn't do that. But where were we? Right, so we've actually been chatting for ages, Catman. If we stay in our little hotbox studios without the aircon on for too much longer, we may die. It's the hottest anyone's ever been. So we've covered the championship, but there's 2 really critical phases, I would say, in Jenson Button's career and legacy after that. In many ways, that was the launch pad to his F1 story proper. Then he makes this decision to leave the team that would end up winning 3 titles in his final 3 years. So, you know what I mean? Like, it's not inconceivable. He stays with that outfit. Did he have a chance to stay with what became Mercedes?
Yeah. They wanted him to stay. They wanted him to stay. But the thing was, so Jenson, how he wants a works team?
Yes.
So Mercedes are coming in. But he's, of course, at Brawn, where they've not got enough money for parts. Do you think they put any money into developing a 2010 car?
So that's absolutely so short. That's so short term, though.
Yeah, it is.
No.
So he went to McLaren, who were the kind of dominant force at the time before that, and were catching them up.
And Brawn did pack up at the end of 2009.
It did, yep. So he bought the team for £1 and sold it for 130 million to Mercedes.
That's not bad.
He's done all right for himself.
He's done all right.
But so Mercedes, they did have some torrid years, with 2013 with Rosberg, and then, oh, wait a minute, then it was 2014, wasn't it? So that didn't go so well. But so for 2010, he moved to McLaren alongside Lewis Hamilton, and everybody thought,
big move.
Okay, Jenson, you got lucky with Brawn and that sort of thing. How are you going to fare against Lewis, who everybody thinks is, racing royalty? And a lot of people then try and justify Jenson and his victory over Lewis over 3 seasons.
Oh, don't. No,
I'm not.
We got more points over 3 seasons. When's that ever been the metric? Most points over 3 seasons. And when he had this thing against Russell, Hamilton outscored Russell in the end, right? Which means nothing, which means absolutely nothing. But just thank God we didn't have to listen to Russell beat Hamilton over points. But you know what they did? Then but it was 2-1. Actually had the gall and these anti-Hamilton people to go, yeah, but it was 2-1. You can't really measure them head to head like that. But I will say that I sort of feel like Button was the closest to Hamilton as a teammate. I think he was. If they'd been fighting for championships, I think that would have been all-time historic teammate battle.
Yeah, they were really close. I remember the battle in Turkey one year where Webber and Vettel took each other out, and then Hamilton and Button were fighting behind them, and they nearly took each other out as well. That was one of the best races I've ever seen. So much close racing. But yeah, Jenson was really close to Lewis.
I still think that Hamilton pips it, but you need some historical context here, which is Hamilton was the better driver in 2010, and I would say, and he was still in the title fight in 2010 and still in the title fight in 2012, like technically, like he was in it. 2011, he wasn't in anything. He wasn't in any kind of fight. He was barely in F1, and he just had this terrible time in a season where Vettel was disappearing with it anyway. But he was splashed across every newspaper. It was all about his relationships and Nicole Scherzinger.
So we've just argued that shouldn't matter to Jenson in his early career. But now when Lewis uses the excuse of sacking his dad as his manager, breaking up with his girlfriend, having on-track incidents with Massa every 5 seconds, the real story that I will argue behind 2011, and actually 2011 was Jenson's best year in F1, no shadow of a doubt. He got 12 podiums and 3 wins, right? Mm. The real story is because 2011, Hamilton struggled with tyre wear, which is alien to people now because he's brilliant at it, but he had to work at it. This was the year, don't forget, that Pirelli was mandated to produce more tyre wear, more pit stops, tyres that would just fall apart. So is a ragged point-to-point driving style going to get you that? Or is a smooth, delicate driving style going to get you better in the situation where you're not overheating the tyres, you're not scrubbing the tyres? So Jenson, in 2011, regardless of what Hamilton was doing off the track or on it when he was smashing into people, Jenson, I think, was going to beat Lewis regardless, to be honest with you. Yeah. And just because of his driving style and his maturity at this point. Don't forget, Lewis is only in season 3 or 4 of his career.
7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 5, season 5.
All right, he should be good enough by then. But Jenson was at the, he's become a champion after many years of struggle with different types of cars. And Lewis hasn't got that experience to be able to do that he would be able to nowadays, say.
But to be clear, that is down to a lifetime of skill to then be able to handle this thing. It's like that's his moment and he's taking it. Just a shame that the Red Bull was so dominant that year.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Vettel just ran away with it, didn't he? But the car was also suited to Jenson because of the blown diffusers. So the 2010 McLaren had a very pointy nose that Lewis likes. And the 2011 car, because they'd worked more on the diffuser, was more stable at the rear, which Jenson likes. So it was coming towards him. And I think Jenson, you're absolutely right, gave Lewis a run for his money, which not many people can say they would be able to do.
Yep. This is it. And is that peak? That's peak Jenson then, isn't it? That we've come to the peak of his career. Champion, great performance in 2011. Hamilton jumped ship at the end of 2012. And this is the bit... Huh?
Yes. So in 2013, Hamilton jumped ship to Mercedes.
End of 2012, yeah.
Jenson also has the opportunity to jump ship to Ferrari. He has a contract drawn up with Ferrari to jump ship there. Now, how different would it have been if he hadn't had gone with McLaren, who were, let's face it, awful from 2014 onwards? The only reason that they were anywhere in 2014 was because of that Mercedes power unit,
which they then abandoned because you can't win anything with a customer car, with a customer engine.
So we'll go for a GP2 engine instead. So
so they went to Honda,
yeah, exactly. So how different would it have been? So he was going to replace Massa alongside Fernando Alonso at Ferrari. So imagine that pairing at Ferrari instead of at McLaren in the Honda era. It might have been a different story for Jenson's career, but unfortunately he tails off into his twilight years with, I think so he was alongside Perez in 2013 at McLaren, and Perez was too young to have, and not mature enough, I think, at that stage to have made the most of that opportunity that he had.
Then Magnussen?
And then Magnussen, and they got, I think in the first weekend of that season with Magnussen, they got a double podium, but that was literally all they got through the rest of the year as far as I can remember. Hang on a second,
that was a fuel flow violation for Red Bull in Australia, wasn't it?
Like that,
it was the flexi hose. So they was only allowed a certain amount of fuel flow, but they managed to have a flexible bit of hose past the sensor. So you pump the gas and it would build up past the sensor, and then when you needed the power, it would then once you hit the accelerator, you have more fuel available. Yeah, and they got
incredibly clever solution.
Yeah,
I mean, you got to think of the minds of these people. Go right. Martin Brundle says you read the regulations twice. You read it once to see what it says, and second to see what it doesn't say, and then basically just make your car according to that.
But then Red Bull kind of got we see you. Just make it unflexible, and got disqualified from that race. Whereas Ferrari, I would say quite a similar sounding violation, got a €50 million fine. and got nerfed for the next couple of years.
Yeah, exactly. So you got to look at these things and see what the motivations. Oh, hang on, am I allowed to say the motivations of the governing body at the time? Who knows?
Hang on, we're just checking with the lawyers. They said to clarify your name. This is Chris Turner. Yeah, and his address is. So we are at this point then where Spanners forgets where we are in the notes. That's where we're at the show. But we are fast running out of time as well. But this descent into madness with the McLaren Honda, and literally a car that just could not keep up on the straights, and two of the best drivers of that intake of that generation just completely wasted in that McLaren. Yeah, horrible. Awful. It was horrible.
Yeah,
to watch.
Absolutely. They were more of a PR exercise for McLaren than anything else at that point, and not necessarily in a good way for Alonso, but. Yeah, it was a real shame because you wanted that partnership to work. You wanted to see the iconic McLaren Honda to come back. If you're looking for where we are in the notes, I haven't written any on this period because there were no highs. There was literally nothing.
I did speak when I spoke to Jenson in Houston, because I'm the sort of person that goes to Houston to speak to Jenson Button off air. I think it was off air. And I think I've said this before, that we said, because it was going so badly, you've had Alonso as a teammate. I think he was talking about how he had really hard teammates. And so, you wouldn't have been taken that seriously. And his face, I believe him, his face was like, because I think Alonso was like hyper competitive still against Jenson there. And then he did talk about some little mind games that Alonso had played. But yeah, it was still competitive, even though it was a disaster at the bottom of the grid. And I think he was right at the end of the day to just call it. But it must have been depressing to look across at the team that he turned down, and that team was just a skater boy. And now look at him. Now look at it on stage and buying tickets to the show.
Brilliant Avril Lavigne reference there. I love that.
You don't say what the reference is. You leave some people delighted and some people confused and angry. That's the thing.
Absolutely. Well, I think Jenson was confused and angry by the end of his tenure at McLaren, which is a real shame. But absolutely, he then went and did lots of other things like Super GT, DTM. Now he's racing for Cadillac at Le Mans, that sort of thing. So he's had an incredible career.
Yeah. Driving, he didn't seem sad when I spoke to him last year. He seemed like very much like a man who was enjoying his life, and obviously living out in Texas as well. I think that's a career less ordinary. And when you look on the scale of champions, he might not go down as one of the great champions, but on the scale of how F1 careers could go, it went pretty well.
So we've had this debate before. So the GOAT of one-time world champion. So Jenson is a one-time champion. So I fight for Rosberg. You went for Mansell.
Of course.
Where does Jenson fit in this? Where does he go? Because don't forget, right, so Mansell was racing against fat blokes who like to drink. Rosberg was racing up against Lewis.
It was a weird title. It was a funny title, 2016.
Yeah, and so Jenson, he's racing against Michael Schumacher, Kimi Räikkönen, Montoya, Alonso, Hamilton, Vettel, all of these guys. Oh, actually, an interesting point there. He's raced against 4 people in the Verstappen family. Can you tell me who those 4 are?
Okay, so obviously we're going for Max, and then his dad, Jos Verstappen, right? His mum was a top-level karter, I think.
Perfect, yes. So he was teammates with Sophie Kumpen, who was Max's mum in Formula A karting. And the last one, this is a bit more tenuous.
A cousin?
Close. So Max's girlfriend, or partner, who's now just had a baby.
Oh, yes. Kelly Piquet.
Yeah. And her brother is Nelson Piquet Jr., who he also raced against.
Of course. I was about to correct you there. That's his dad, actually. But no, of course. Nelson Piquet Jr. Also, I would think ultimately, you painted the story of his championship being based on, a spawny regulation set, being favoured over his teammate and then clinging on despite a litany of errors.
Yep.
Actually, I think his head-to-head with Hamilton is more of a defining part of his career, and didn't look bad against Alonso at all. And I think that's the thing that people will look at that and go, no, he was a quality racer. But F1 is a game of being in the right seat at the right time.
Absolutely. And people say that about Alonso. He should be like a 7 times champion, but he wasn't in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, that was his own fault.
Absolutely. Yeah. But Jenson, you could see from our story today, he was trying his very best to make sure he was in the wrong place at the wrong time, but in the end managed to get there. So it's all about unfulfilled promise. And I think Jenson managed to fulfill the promise, not necessarily in the season that he should have done it in, but he did it in a good way. And he's justly reserved for a very talented driver.
In Saving Private Ryan, I think they're quite lucky they were protecting that bridge against the Germans and not Fernando Alonso, because he would have just swept through and just burnt that bridge along with all the others. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, that was a really interesting look at Jenson Button, and I hope those of you who are into F1 more recently have, quote unquote, learned, or at least this is something that you could put on while mowing the lawn. Go and follow Catman. I will put links in the show notes below. Where are you active? Are you active on Blue Sky, you hippie?
A little bit on Blue Sky. Yeah, I've abandoned X. But yeah, Blue Sky is where you can find me, mainly after reviews that I'm on and stuff. So I'm hoping to get back on the main show fairly soon.
I'm still on X because that's where I get the most attention. So I'll just go wherever I get the most attention. So start paying attention to me over on Instagram and TikTok and encourage that kind of thing. But I'm on Blue Sky and X as well. Thank you very much, Catman. And wherever we see you next, work hard, be kind, and have fun. This was Mr. Apex Podcast. Put your fan on.
Gonna go jump in the pool, I think, in the kids' paddling pool.
If you'd have just announced to me now that you have a private swimming pool, everyone round Catman's house.
I'd have recorded from a little inflatable with a cocktail in there if I had one.
What an image in a mankini.